Hello and welcome once again to another wonderful Wednesday webinar. We have a very old friend and relentless activist like myself, Paul O'Connor, one of the founders of Undercurrents and absolute pioneer of early video activism from when it was VHS video magazines right up to Indymedia and the present day. So one of the legends of the media underground scene. Over to you, Paul. Thank you very much for coming and sharing some of your knowledge and wisdom. Over.
Thanks, Phoenix, and thanks everybody who's turned up. So yeah, it's really only when Phoenix got in touch that I realized that this year is 30 years since we started this whole shenanigans of video activism. So I'm just going to go through kind of a brief history of my own personal story, really involved in video activism. So 1993, it all kind of started with a thing called Undercurrents, and it started here in East London. And this is Wanstead, the M11 link road trying to come through London. And I got involved in protests there. They were destroying 1,000 trees and 350 houses, which I thought was crazy to shave off a few minutes to get into London. So getting involved in that campaign was kind of changed my life, really, and the course of it. There was a lot of people there resisting, and this is days before the internet, before video on the web or anything like that, really. So, and it was very controlled media. So trying to get word out what was happening was quite difficult at the time. So a lot of people would end on the road, either on the roads or on the roofs. They'd send in the cops. A lot of people would be pulled out, but it just built up, and the momentum and the humor of this campaign was amazing. So I looked to inspiration, and Dennis kind of seemed to sum it all up, really. And using our camcorders. So this is my first camcorder I ever had. I traded in my cameras. I had stills cameras, Nikons, traded them in, bought a video camera which was waterproof and I thought bash proof, until the security guards had a go at it on the first day and smashed it. But I realized actually it's quite powerful having a camcorder and be able to record what was actually going on, and showing it to a wider audience was a big thing then. But also on the other side, these guys here I'm filming, they're from Bray's Detectives, and they used to go and make files about protesters, and they turn up and film us. So we ended up filming them and making a film about what they were doing. We realized actually we're taking back the power here. So again, here we'd get stuck in. You can see my yellow camcorder there. So it was Frontline, really. We weren't like ITN or BBC standing way back and behind the police lines. We were giving an image that was up close and personal. And of course, we can do it all with mobile phones now, but this is all Video 8 as well that we're filming on. So as this group formed, called Small World Media, or Undercurrents as it became known later, 4 of us or 5 of us kind of teamed up, including Zoe, who's on this Zoom here, Zoe Broughton. But we raised the money to buy an edit suite, and an edit suite in 1993 was a huge deal. There was no other group connected with activism that had an edit suite, just because they were so bloody expensive. But we would go and train people to make films on VHS to VHS machines, and we'd make a short film, and then use that and put it onto the digital setup that we had. So we'd be making a online film, and that was revolutionary for activism. And a similar time from those protests, things started spreading out. Reclaim the Streets became a huge thing, which spread and we'd go out with our camcorders and film any protest that was going on all over the country then after a while, and our films would be shared, and we realized there's a real need for sharing this sort of thing. And then of course other people got involved, and we had the Camcorder Action Network, we called it. People with camcorders filming their own protests. They'd send it to Undercurrents, and then we'd help them make a film. So this is Zoe. So Zoe was a key integral part of Undercurrents as well. And she's been non-stop filming again for 30 years. And here she is looking young and fresh.
Still looks the same.
So this is the first. She still looks the same, exactly. She doesn't age like the rest of us. So this is how we started, because in days before the internet, how do you show your film? So it was Tony Benn at the time had just brought out a video of his own speeches, a compilation of his speeches, and it sold 100,000 video cassettes, VHS cassettes, and we just thought, that's outstanding. Wow. So we thought, well, okay, there's obviously there's an interest in politics. So with the people we trained, 5, 6, 7-minute films, we'd put them onto one video cassette. This was the plan. Put it onto a video cassette, and then it'd be like a magazine. People would subscribe. So we thought, okay, let's give it a go. So we made a film about the M11 Link Road. It was a half-hour film, and then plus a few other films. Criminal Justice Bill had just come in 1994, but there was no media coverage of that. So we said, well, let's make a film of that. We got in films from travelers, from squatters, from Right to Silence, and raves, all the things that was affected. And that was the first film that was actually made on the Criminal Justice Bill. So that went on this VHS cassette. And then it was all about, how do we get word out about what we're doing? And it was just get out there, get on the road. We went to Glastonbury in a big bus, showed films on a big bus in Glastonbury. We showed it in every community centre we could find, festivals, art centres, you name it, really. We showed it, and it caught, and people got and start subscribing. And because they subscribed, we could start bringing out Undercurrents 2 and then Undercurrents 3, and they'd come out every 6 months. And a lot of work making these films, especially working with people who'd never made a film before or even picked up a camcorder, but it gave it a passion, because people were involved in the campaigns themselves. It wasn't outsiders, media students, whatever, coming in. These were people active, like they were active on the front line, making, this is how we saw the protests from a frontline view. And it really caught the imagination. We went all the way up, and then Undercurrents 9 was coming out, and this is now 1999 we're up to now. So those 10 years, and then that's what 10. Now things were changing. VHS was being phased out, so, and DVDs were coming in, so we were looking at that, making DVDs for distribution. And then media coverage. This was our first ever actually media coverage from the Guardian. And that made a huge difference when people thought they started subscribing. And our phones were crazy. Because from that we had TV, we were getting on the Little Picture Show, various kind of fringe TV programs we'd end up on. And then our phone lines would just go crazy, and people phoning in said, right, how do I subscribe? And suddenly we were going, okay, we have a distribution network here. And then just media coverage just went crazy. We were everywhere. The idea of using a camcorder for activism really caught hold. Like, it's been around for years. Like, people have been making protest videos really since the camera was invented. It's nothing new, but the difference was it was a camcorder that was affordable. Like, the Handycam was out, with the Sony Handycam was out since 1986. And and suddenly it was affordable. Like by the 90s, there were secondhand cameras around. BBC were giving out cameras for, as part of a community camcorder program, and they kind of went missing into the protest scene. And so people could film and make their own news. Again, this picture alone, really, it's filmed from the rooftop of a house on the M11 Link Road, looking at the bailiffs trying to evict people. Television news would never go up on a roof. It just wouldn't happen. But because we had the footage, and then suddenly we could sort of go to TV and say, well, listen, we filmed this. You won't get these images. We have bailiffs dragging people off. We have chainsaws, walls being smashed in, windows caving in. Of course, ITV, BBC, CNN, European stations were all calling us saying, can we use your footage? And it was like, great. And suddenly we had a whole different network now, and we start supplying regular footage. So yeah, I'll just come back to that in a second. So that was a kind of another distribution. And also what that did was we were selling this footage to TV, and the money from that then was going into supporting what we were doing, buying new camcorders or travel costs to get the place, whatever. And that was really a useful source of income. So we'd have income from the VHS tapes, and we'd have income from the TV channels. And trying to keep something like this, like news is a very expensive thing to do when you really start trying to do it consistently. But after a while, of course, like by the end of the 90s, DVDs came in, and we tried to do DVDs for a while, but the internet was coming in then, like 2005, YouTube set up. And kind of what it did was it kind of killed our revenue. And that was really difficult when we looked at the internet and thought, well, we have a distribution here on the internet that's free and easy, but we've no way of funding what we're doing. So that caused a lot of problems at the time. So this is all the VHS tapes. What do you do with them for recycling? And this was something I met a couple of weeks ago, this group down in Cheltenham. And there are people like, there's so many VHS tapes around now, thousands of them. And where do they go? They go to landfill. But these guys here go around care homes, and they give these tapes. They'll turn up with 350 tapes, and the care homes will just sit there taking them apart, every last screw, nut and bolt, until they're like this, and they recycle them all the different plastics, all the metal, everything goes in. So that's where our VHS tapes that were left, that's where they've ended up. So again, it was the camcorder, like revolution, everything really. And then it was traveling the world really, like after seeing sort of what was going on here, the anti-capitalist movement start really building momentum. So I'd go around looking at IMF protests, training activists over in the States. And this was the start of Indymedia, which, if you don't know what Indymedia was, it was a grassroots online media, newspaper, video, TV, whatever you'd want to call it. But it was basically people could post their own views, their own news about what was happening. And that was amazing. That was like, it was kind of what we wanted to do, but we didn't have the technical know-how. And suddenly like, Indymedia was everywhere, and that took over. It was worldwide, and that was fascinating as a way of getting yeah, being everywhere. It was the COPs, I think it was the third COP in Berlin. Even ended up in the Telegraph at one point. So I saw a cop hiding behind a tree, filming the activists. So I went over and stuck my camera in theirs, and yeah, I ended up in the Telegraph, which would be a badge of honor. Climate camps,
Paul, just a little
cannabis protests.
on Indymedia.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, tell us a little bit more. It was Seattle it was born at, and a little bit of citizens journalism that anyone could add in, because I felt it was such an incredible thing that people from all over the world
really was
go to America. Europe to Hong Kong, so
Yeah,
you could upload there.
yeah.
Tell us a little bit more on how it worked and how it came about a little bit.
Well, it kind of run about. It was in 1999, June the 18th, Carnival Against Capitalism. Tens of thousands of activists shut down the City of London as a protest against capitalism. And as part of that, there was people who wanted to say, we want to live stream the videos from the streets, and we want to have people uploading their own reports. And we got involved in that and said, okay, we'll coordinate the camcorders. So we got people with camcorders all over London filming different parts of the protests. But also in Australia, the same thing, was protests in Sydney at the same time. And that was kind of the beginnings of Indymedia. So it was kind of a dry run. It wasn't even a dry run, it was actually a live run to see how it would work. And I remember, so this is 1999, like the internet is kind of, it's beginning, and video on the web is quite a huge thing. And we had Matt Black from Ninja Tunes. He was live streaming all the images, and he was in a secret hold up. And we'd get all the camcorders. We organized couriers to get people's tapes back through the police lines, and it was all very exciting. Like, and it was wild, like shutting down all sorts of financial institutions, streets. It was, what a time. And I remember getting all the tapes back, and I got back into this location with Matt Black while he was streaming. He had, like, it was like NASA. The amount of kit he had was mind-blowing. And I asked him, I said, well, how many people are watching? And he goes, oh, about 18 we're up to now. And I was thinking, 18,000, that's great. And he goes, no, 18. And it was a real sort of wake-up call. I went, wow, okay, this is a long way to go. But it was the kind of start of it, really. And then 2 years later in Seattle, Indymedia grew out of that Carnival Against Capitalism and used the techniques and the technology that was there. And that exploded because suddenly Seattle protesters shut down the entire World Trade Organization summit. And suddenly people wanted to find out about it. They went to Indymedia, and you could see reports from the streets, photographs, written reports, video clips, and it was revolutionary. And then that spread really quickly, and different groups start using it all over the world. And then you have Indymedia UK, Indymedia France, Brazil, everywhere. And suddenly this whole network spread, and it was a really exciting time for a few years. But that was Indymedia, and it kind of imploded in a way, really, because it got too geeky. The geeks got hold of it and pushed a lot of people out, and which is the nature of these things, really. But meanwhile, we were out there doing Undercurrents, filming, making films, doing our stuff, being recognized by Pinkerton Securities. So I was a wanted man for a while. Then I looked at sort of online video was great, but actually you couldn't beat bringing people together. I thought it was really important to bring people together. So we set up a film festival, Beyond TV, and we gave a camcorder to Shay, because we thought a camcorder back in the day, if you could. But that was a really really important sort of thing what we were doing every year. It kind of focused us to pull a film festival together, and we did it for 10 years every year, and it inspired people. And we kind of put the festival into video festivals by just having talks, having films, having music, and having the whole thing, really, and inspire people. And we did that in Swansea, and where I moved to after a while. And then a few years ago, the fracking, when that was a big issue up in Blackpool, we went up there and made a film up there, and just went around getting the cameras in front of the cops and sort of telling the story that wasn't being told, really. Fracking wasn't really being talked about, really. Well, there was amazing things going on there. People were blockading every single day of the week for years. So we went up, made a film, myself and Zoe, who's on this chat as well. And with that film, of course, yeah, we interviewed sort of various at the time, George Monbiot. And then with the film, we went on tour, and we took the film just everywhere, like all over the country, anywhere, excuse me, anywhere where fracking was an issue, either coming or threatened or whatever. We'd turn up and show the film, and people would come along and who'd never been involved in protests before and actually say, okay, tell us what you've seen. And we'd show this film and say, well, this is what's happening up in Blackpool. Here's a film about it. Here's the locals. Here's the activists who are coming in from all over the country to support them. And it gave a lot of people hope, and that was quite an amazing time, really. But we went everywhere. And it was using video targeted, really, and that's kind of what I wanted to do, really, is trying to make some sort of difference rather than just filming everything and putting footage out online in clips everywhere, but actually try to be targeted with it. And yeah, it was an interesting experience going around doing that.
I mean, that was a really powerful film. That campaign actually won in the end. We couldn't see it when you're in the middle of it, but you know, they stopped fracking in the UK. So great work to reach out to those communities, the power of film and video activism.
Absolutely, yeah. It was a real lesson, really. And Israel is kind of in the news at the moment. So this was a few years ago, 2011 this was, and there was people going out to Palestine and just arriving at Tel Aviv airport. So for people who don't know, you cannot get into Palestine, you cannot fly into Palestine. To go to Palestine, you either have to fly into Israel or come through Egypt. If you fly into Israel and they ask you, why are you here? Where are you going? And if you say, I'm going to Palestine, they arrest you and then try to deport you. And this was unofficial. This was their unofficial policy, but it's what they were doing. So activists decided around the world to fly in and say, I'm going to Palestine, and get mass arrest and really bring an issue to the whole thing. But I realized that the only way it's going to happen is if we have footage to show what they actually do. If we don't have that footage, it'll just be ignored. So we tried to work out, well, if they're going to go into Tel Aviv airport, be arrested, be locked up, how do we get a camera into an Israeli prison? So we kind of worked out all sorts of ways, really, and doing it because we figured the only way everything would be taken off you, except possibly one thing would be a watch. You're doing time, they're probably happy you to sort of have a watch. So we found a camera built into a watch, and one of the activists wore that watch. So when she got arrested, she recorded on this watch inside the prison. And we got these images out. And this is basically what made the difference, really. Having images inside an Israeli prison of international people being arrested for no other reason than saying they want to go to Palestine. So that made, we got it onto ITV News when they got back. And then that built up, and then suddenly Al Jazeera's picked it up, and then that became a news story. And then it just went all over the world then. Various news channels start picking it up. And this guy here on the left was the head of Giron prison, where they were held. So he got sacked. And the comments were amazing. Like, we were accused by Israeli newspapers as building a prison set, like a studio, like a Hollywood studio, and making this fake prison. So none of it was real. And this caught on Israelis. Like, we were getting loads of Israelis telling us this. It's just like, wow, how delusional can you get? But it kind of had an effect on it, really. It really put pressure on Israel at that stage, which was great. And again, it was a targeted use of video. And yeah, it was a good campaign to be involved in. And then by this stage, I was thinking, well, need to get into more sort of positive, life-affirming stuff, really. So I started looking at eco villages and how people were trying to set up things rather than just protesting against things, and sort of saying, what sort of world are we trying to build? So I worked with Ben Law, who's a woodsman who built his own house off grid, challenged the planning system, and he had a particular way of building with round wood, so you don't have to do so much work on the trees themselves. But yeah, amazing guy there. But I spent 6 months with him in the woods down in Hampshire filming, and I love that, really. And then also here in Gower, I've been filming hedge laying, kind of sustainable tree growing and hedge laying, and that's been good, except for the rain. What can you do? And now, really, this is where everything is done now. It's on a mobile phone. You have a mobile phone in your pocket, you film, you can distribute, you can do everything through that. And Zoe brought in a kind of key activist for using this, really, like no one else. Like, she's made incredible use of it. And anybody now has the technology in their pockets. But what I would say is, be focused about why you're filming and how you're filming and what you're intending to do with it. Because I think now we're awash with images across social media and everything else. It really is to watch, and trying to work your way through it. So we need some ways of something like an Indymedia, again, would be great, but some ways of sort of people telling stories in good, simple, direct ways. That's kind of what I'd like to see, really. So this was another project now that I sort of is looking at how film. There's a lot of these short films. You go into YouTube now, there's lots of short films, but it's not much of an experience to watch if you're sitting there alone on your laptop. So I thought, we need a cinema. So with a few friends, we made a solar powered cinema, which we tour around the country, and it's solar powered. It's between 8 and 12 people, depend how cozy they want to get, for a 5-minute film. But it's performance. We do popcorn, usherettes, and we get booked for like a lot of very mainstream events, and we can show whatever we like. And it's a great way of showing kind of activist footage, because it's disarming. People get caught up in the theatricals of it, but once we have them in that little box, we can show them whatever we like. And it's a great way of building audiences, 8 at a time, and building up support, really, for different issues. So that's been a lot of fun, really. We've been doing that now for 12 years now. This was Glastonbury. So again, we build a crew and get together and just have a laugh, which is really important in any sort of video activism. If you're not enjoying what you're doing, get out, don't do it. Just find ways of really enjoying what you're doing and avoid burnout, because it's very easy to get burnt out. But if you can find new ways of making your films and showing your films, I think you're onto a winner. So that's kind of it, really. And now here we are 30 years later, and that was kind of a brief snapshot of some of the things I've been up to. So it's probably, if anybody has any questions, really, I'm happy to try and come up with some answers.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you, Paul, for that presentation, and your dedicated years of training up probably hundreds or thousands of your Jedi apprentices to get out there on the front lines and share film. So if anyone has got any questions, and I've got a couple there, there's a reactions button down the bottom. You can raise your hand. We can see who's popped their hand up or anything, or you can wave your hands if I can see your face. I'll jump in there with a question just while we wait to see if others ask some questions, put their hands up. Any advice to, you know, activist or community project groups or groups like Climate Emergency Centres about how to promote their project or their event or activity or protest on video?
Well, I guess build yourself a little cinema and go touring. I think one of the biggest problems is too many people rely on social media as an easy way out. They just dump it. I think we got to find new ways of showing films. We really do. And I think whatever it is, get onto the streets, getting people together. Communal experiences is really what it's about. Like, cinema is dying. You can see, you go to any cinema on the high street, they're all dying. And it's because they're not an experience. Like, some of the independent cinemas are doing great because they're offering something different. So I think basically anybody making films, think about getting people together to watch the films. Whether it's a front room or whether it's a pub, but just do that. Get people together.
Cool. That's Zoe on the chat saying about Zoe, do you want to tell us a little bit about your film night that you do? And that's been going for quite a long time, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's been going like 7 or 8 years now. And it's basically an open screen. People can show up to 10 minutes of films that they have made. They don't necessarily need to be finished, and it's mostly filmmakers that come along and or audiences for people's films. If you've got a film you want to show, and they're discussed after being shown, and sometimes it's in terms of the film skills, and people sort of team up afterwards as well. You'll find people come along saying they know how to do, you know, they've got music they want to offer, or they do color correction, and people sort of end up teaming up to work on projects together. And it's just free, open to everyone on Zoom and in person.
That's brilliant. That's what we need. Quite any advice from both of you on quite a few of the Climate Emergency Centre groups? I know Helen was on as well, trying to find films that can be shown, because there's sometimes if you want to show a commercial film, there's licensing limitations. But is there any good web links to go to for community centres to be able to show environmental, green solutions or activist films without, you know, restrictions, shall I say? Right.
There probably is. Yeah, I could probably find a few links and post it. Nothing comes offhand. Like on our Undercurrents website, Power Trip is there. But the fracking, you can download a copy of that and screen that. But yeah, nothing else jumps to mind again, really.
Oh.
We need, yeah, that would be a useful resource to have.
I think, do you want to stop screen sharing maybe, Paul, and then we can see faces when or hands. Deb's got a hand up there. Deb's, you got a question? Yeah. Over to Preston.
Did you help make the Power Trip film, Paul?
Yeah.
Cool. I went to the premiere of it at Manchester.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh, that was great. Yeah.
It was in that what was it called? The art place, weren't it? Oh, the Paperworks. That's where it was.
Oh, the Paperworks. Yeah. The Paperworks, yeah. It was a good skip outside that. I remember getting some good stuff over skip.
That's Manchester for you.
Yeah. But again, like, it was like we showed that to so many different types of people. It was fascinating, really. There was one area where it was all Tories, some small village up in Yorkshire, and that was amazing. Like, to have a bunch of Tories sort of turning up to an activist film screening, that was very odd. But basically they were angry. They were angry about fracking, but they didn't agree with people taking direct action. That was an interesting discussion about, well, what would they do?
Mm-hmm. Over to Helen, who I know has been trying to work out which films we could show at Climate Emergency Centres, and then Zoe.
I'm just thinking, I bet they didn't have any good answers of what to do instead of protesting. But anyway,
that's right.
we're in a climate justice coalition group in West Yorkshire, looking at what we're going to do about COP. And I wonder, is there some way of screening stuff outside? Because they're talking again of let's meet here and march there and chant there and then stand around in the main street and have loudspeakers, and nobody who isn't already part of it really listens. And I'm just thinking if we could find some way of, I'm thinking the old Debenhams has got great big boards in front of it. We've tried sticking banners and things on it and they haven't let us, but I'm thinking if we could do an outside filming on those boards on the main shopping streets, people might stop and watch that.
Great idea. Absolutely great idea. I think that's kind of what we need to do. Guerrilla screenings.
Yeah.
Like the biggest problem we have in this country, of course, is weather.
Yeah, but I don't know. We're usually quite lucky. The sun tends to shine on the righteous, I think. So we have this appalling weather forecast, but it clears while we have the rally and then comes down again.
There is that group led by donkeys, isn't there, that video projects onto the House of Parliament, or big companies and things, and they've got very powerful projectors. I think there is no law to stop you at the moment about projections, is there?
Exactly.
I remember thinking it'd be really good to do something. When we sort of, I think it was when we first came out of COVID or whatever, or maybe it was a Black Friday, and there are all these millions of sheep queuing outside Primark to get in, and I thought if we could just be projecting something opposite them. Yeah, anyway, yeah.
Right. Well, it's a great thing to do, because it's thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
Because you basically just set it up, project it onto like projectors now are so cheap, and you can buy LED projectors very cheap, and they throw a good image. And then with a small Bluetooth speaker, you have a mobile cinema.
Can you tell us a little bit more about Climate Camp TV and how that came about? Because I think you did a solar powered Climate Camp TV for one of them. I think Richard was telling me about.
So Climate Camp TV, 2005, I think that was. Again, it's pushing the boundaries, really. We thought we could set up our own TV channel, or like a news presenting. So with a mixer, we got a mixer with 2 camcorders, and we thought, okay, the protests were happening, trying to shut down this power station. And when the activists got back, Climate Camp was in a field, amazingly organized. And we set up a TV channel. So people would come in, we'd sit them there in a chair, and we'd interview them and say, well, what just happened? And we'd interview them live and then mix images from the protest live. So it was like an activist news night, if you like. And that's the first time we knew it had ever been done. And it was kind of revolutionary. It was a lot of hard work, but again, it was kind of interesting. We had people turning up at the camp saying they only came because they'd been watching what we were doing, and it gave them an insight into what was going on, what the camp looked like, and some of the issues. And that was really interesting. It was like, now I suppose like we're used to live streaming, so seeing a protest live isn't such a big thing, but back then it was totally revolutionary.
It's amazing how it's evolved over the years. I remember on the early road protest, a friend, techie John Headstrong, said the internet was just arriving, and we had links with groups from Mexico, like Zapatistas, to the Indian peasant farmers movements, linking up. And he was saying, the internet had just arrived and was linking us up. He was saying, I can get you this big camera and something called a modem and one of these big chunky mobile phones. You can link them all together, and then you can film them when they're chopping down the trees and, the security are doing or whatever. And little do we guess that 10, 15, 20 years later, there's these tiny little, phones in your hand that can film stuff, and we've seen stuff and what's going on with the, you know, the umbrella movement in Hong Kong to, you know, to over to America, and the Occupy movement really accelerated live streaming, where you could sit in your front room while you're having your breakfast and listen to a debate in New York, and then be another group in Frankfurt, and groups could send each other pizzas from around the world saying, you know, we see what you're doing, you know. So it really has revolutionized over time, isn't it? The power of the media is diluted from, you know, 3 main media channels that only tell a certain perspective to anyone can be filming stuff and sending it out, you know.
That's right, yeah. Like the technologies, it's incredible what's happened. And just the 30 years I've been involved, where we've seen it go from VHS tapes to now full-on 4K live distribution, like mind-blowing.
Definitely. I mean, one of if anyone else does have a question, stick your hand up there in the reactions or wave your hand. One of the most powerful things I think really was Indymedia, because it created thousands of citizen journalists that, you know, I was amazed on some of the ones that we went to, that literally people they could just write something up. I went to this action event project, whatever, or they could send in their own photos and video. And I don't know why that really stopped. There was a lot of different factors, I think, on it, you know, but it was a great thing that anybody could be a citizen journalist, you know, from a grassroots person, anybody who just wanted to write up, I went today to, you know, wherever it was, and this happened, and this is my version of events. And obviously, you know, different perspectives, different people, but it was very powerful to reclaim the narrative from, you get back from a demo and you see the mainstream newspapers as, you know, you're on demo and you're pretty sure there was 50, 80,000 people, and the mainstream newspaper says 3,000 people turned up. You know, if you've got your own video camera or you can write up your own report, it does reclaim the narrative a bit. It's, you know, it's been great to see these things change, and we need to work out about how we take it to the next stage. And we are a bit bombarded with social media with so many things to watch. So how do we create cut through really to get more people to watch good projects and things?
We need an activist version of Netflix.
Sounds good. I'd love to see something like that, Indymedia and activist flicks come through. Let's keep working on it. Eleanor.
Hi, yeah. Activist version of Netflix sounds awesome. The climate camp thing sounds familiar. I had 2 questions. One is regarding like local press. They're not as interested or as active as they could be. Is there a reason for that? You know, are they owned by corporations actually, and then we don't know about it? And the other question is HS2 technology aside, is there anything interesting you could share with us about the streaming or the targeting of video from the HS2 tree occupiers movement, and if there's anything that, you know, that you would have liked to get involved with there yourself, or to maybe correct or be creative on. Does that make sense?
Yep. Never got involved in the HS2.
You mean like you mean like any data,
Any what? Sorry.
Because when I was working during COVID, there were these lorries outside my building taking stuff to HS2 site, like great big iron cylinders. It was a Siemens building. They're now owned by a different company.
Okay. Thanks, Abiba. Paul, you were going to come back on that one?
So HS2, I never got involved in. Zoe, I know, has filmed a lot there, so she might be able to give some insight into that. But for your other question about the local media is, there really is no such thing as local media anymore. They're all owned by larger media companies, but they're very lazy. You can get stuff into local media pretty easily if you're clever, by doing their job for them. And press releasing, learn how to write a press release. And to write a press release is you're doing the work for a journalist. Because a journalist, there's less journalists in local papers for a start. So they're more pressurized, but they have to produce these stories. So if you can write it in a way like local newspapers, read local newspapers and see how they write it, and write something and work out what's the hook that they'd be interested in. And it's amazing. Like, I get stuff in local papers all the time just because I understand how it works, by reading local papers. And there are a lot of people read local newspapers, but a lot of these, like here in Swansea now, our one is it's owned by a company in Birmingham, and they don't know the local language, they don't know the local area, so they're getting stuff wrong all the time. And all they're doing is pulling off news press releases from the police. The majority of local newspapers are just from the police, because it's simple stories, like court cases, whatever the police have done last, who they've arrested and all that, and they'll just regurgitate it. So, but if you can sort of consistently, but they have to trust you. If you can get friendly with local journalists and they trust you, you're in, because you're doing their job for them, which they love it.
Just a quick feedback there, and over to Zoe. Is building relationships with the individual journalists very important. The more you get a friendly journalist, they will write more stuff with you. But there are quite a lot of the local newspapers, North and South London, and around, that are owned by a big group, and they literally own 12 local newspapers, 15, 20. There's a big conglomerate there behind them, even though you think they're local. But yeah, build relationships. Zoe, over to equally with Paul, as equal long-term, pick up the legends of the media activism world, Paul and Zoe. Zoe's got a question or a comment, feedback, over.
Yeah, no, I was going to say with HS2, there was a whole thing with like lots of people did live streaming and things, and I'm a really big fan of live streaming because it gets the story out there straight away and you don't have to do all night edits. But on the other hand, you have to take into account that it probably is being watched by all sorts of people. Somebody actually told us, I think it was somebody in Netpol, had actually heard somebody had gone through a police place, and where they have their sort of incident desks, and one of the many screens, they'll have the screens up from the different streets, that they can watch what's going on in each street, but they also had the live stream up in there. So they are definitely used by the police to actually watch what's going on and what's happening where. But if you film with that in mind, and also take into account that there are so many surveillance cameras around anyway, that things are being filmed, and if you're in somewhere around Westminster doing an action, then there's more cameras there than you can probably imagine or think about. It's just another camera there at that point. But it does get the story out really widely, I think. With when I went to HS2, the thing I thought about was, like, I was really concerned about all the nature being destroyed, which is now unnecessarily being destroyed, a lot of it. But one of the things I did was to document where I could see there was some standing dead trees, for example, and then I took that footage to a wildlife expert who deals with court cases. And then he actually got really interested and was telling me other things I should go and film, and then took up on it. He could spot what things should be actually being looked out for. So he knew that in one area that I'd filmed and showed him the footage, there were standing dead trees. That was a high chance of there being bats in that area. And if there were a certain type of bat there, they would have to potentially take that into account with what they took down. And they also had loads and loads of really high powered lights being pointed at the trees, which would also completely disturb the bats, so they'd be unlikely to come out or be seen in with the way that they were disturbing things, and with machinery going and all sorts. But he was monitoring all of that, so he could use, it's another use of video footage. He could use my footage and told me what things to film that he could then use as part of a sort of legal case to see whether they should stop what they were doing there. So it was just another angle on trying to stop that project. The Netflix thing was just an idea. There was a couple of guys talking about it in terms of trying to set up an equivalent of, but as they moved into it and how they could make money from it, they realized that people would have to be charged to actually watch the films, like as in Netflix. You'd either need to subscribe or pay to view, and that then made it into a different category, really, I think, as well. There'd be lots of complications on it and things, but I like the idea of there being, it could even be a website where we've got access to loads of these different films that are free to view, so that, communities, the climate centres could then scroll through and see what they wanted to watch and things, and maybe have some contacts for people involved in the filmmaking. I've done a few climate film nights, and then basically we did the fracking one, and which Paul made and I helped out on, and then also one that we'd done on oil extraction in Canada, and then we actually linked in people who were in the films. We linked them in on Zoom calls for the Q&A afterwards, and had a gathering of people, so that you had the networking going on of different people interested in those issues, and then Q&A afterwards.
Brilliant. I think there's a lot more to be chatted in on those. Collectively, you guys have trained hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands probably of new video activists all across the UK and around the world. That's phenomenal work, guys. Maximum respect for all you've been doing for decades. Welcome, Mary Ellen from DPAC, so beaming in towards the end, another legendary activist. You want to just say a quick hello or anything? We're on the tail end of things here.
Oh, sorry for my late arrival, but so much on my plate at the moment. But yeah, it's good to know that you're doing this every week, and I will keep trying to join you. Thank you.
Most welcome. Big up all the DPAC Disabled People Against Cuts crew. If anyone wants to give us your email do a direct message to me in the chat. We'll make sure you're on the email list for future webinars and updates. It is so important to get this message out, of all the good projects, the activism, and whenever it was, like Paul right back in the beginning was, the VHS version, pre that so few people had cameras. I remember in the early 90s at the Rainbow Centre and other places, there was like Delvin and Rainbow, Susanna's daughter, were the only few people we knew with a video camera. And now it's, we are very lucky to have the power of the world's media in our in our cameras and our phones. So I think Daphne Darendorf's got a question or feedback for the last bits. Daphne.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to sort of thank you partly, Paul. So interesting to hear the history and how you did things. I was dashing around with a camera quite a lot as well back when I did generally have cameras, but I was quite unfocused in how I would produce the material, and didn't follow it through so much. And it's just so great to hear you all. And Phoenix, I just want to thank you for keeping me somehow in that network, through the WhatsApp. I think if that's, if I need to be on an email list, let me know. But that it seems to get me at least a little bit of information. I'm Zoe, just to say I am moving to Oxford, so I hope that I will make contact with you and come to the Film Oxford things, and maybe that will get me motivated to kind of put some stuff together, and you sort of answered a lot of the things that were in my mind, about the importance of getting together and watching things together and having those opportunities to talk about stuff and share thoughts and ideas and information. So yeah, thanks.
Lovely. That's great, Daphne. Yeah, stay on the WhatsApp, or if you do want to give us an email, that's good as well. Absolutely fascinating tonight. We've learned a lot of a kind of 30-year journey, and just to say, this is people's history. This is our history. This is her story. This is tribal, our story. It's really important to preserve some of this. I know through the resistance exhibition that we do as we tour around the country, Richard, who I work with, there's an archiving section for people to both scan and archive their paperwork and their posters and leaflets, but also to upload their video footage with tagging it, women's protest, M11, whatever it was, tree protest. It's really important because people search for it on the internet and find this stuff, and particularly VHS and the really early, what was it, Super 8 or something you guys used before VHS. It falls apart after 10 years in the attic, apparently. So there's a group there, the Bishopsgate Institute, I've just put in the chat. They will store any of your paper archive or any of your video. And I think there's a guide to archiving on the History of Resistance website, which Richard has put together there, if you scroll through it a little bit. All right, any parting comment there from Paul or Zoe, legends of the activism video world?
Can I say something quickly?
Oh, quick one, Ariel. Yeah,
just I don't know if everyone's noticed or knows about it, but Deepak has very successfully helped to stop the closure of all the train stations. So big up Deepak, and let's add that to the archives.
Thanks, Deepak, because you get so forgotten and you get the most cuts. So thanks for still trying your best. I'm going to take a lesson from that.
Thank you so much, Abiba.
You were on the radio this morning. I heard about that, and that's really, really important work. You know, we all need to work together across all movements and projects and promote the kind of futures we want to see. Last parting comment really here to Zoe and then Paul, really, who, you know, thank you for doing what you're doing. And, you know, millions and millions of people have seen that footage over the years. I think I was on Undercurrents 1, the first video magazine, but thank you for doing what you're doing. So Zoe, parting comment to any budding young Jedi video activists out there.
Oh, I'd say learn how to get good footage on your phone, because you never know if you're going to be the one that could record something and it could like support a protester in court with that footage, or you could be the one that gets their messages out to a really wide audience. Over to you, Paul.
When you start, if you start filming now, just think 30 years from now that people will be getting inspired by something you filmed today, because I get contacted on a weekly basis, like the most random things that people have watched a video from 1993 and it's completely got them inspired and got them involved in a different campaign. So you have no idea what effect your footage will have anywhere around the world. So keep going and think 30 years ahead.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming. Some good links in the chat there. And keep at it wherever you are. And the power of film really does, you know, spread. So have a cinema night at your climate emergency centre. Zoe's got some great film nights there, and I'm sure if you want to contact her direct, she can link you up with various films and stuff. And it, you know, it really, really, really can change things. You know, the power of media and the power of the that you have in your phone. So yeah, use it and keep networking. All right, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much to Paul and to Zoe for your decades of work and for coming tonight and sharing your knowledge with the network. We will see you next week and soon.
Right.
Take care.
Thanks, Phoenix.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Yes, guys, have a great night.
Night, everyone.
Night, night.
Shalom.
Bye.
Salam.
Sweet.
Salam, salam. Okay, just going to
Salam,
say
salam, yes.
stop the recording.
Yes.
Lovely to see you, Mariam.
Lots of love.
You,
Lovely to see you,
Phoenix.
Mariam.